And welcome everyone as the attendees are starting to come in. I want to thank you very much for taking the time today to not only hear from Mike and Dennis, but also to have your questions asked and answered in real time. Now, before we pass it over to Dennis for his opening remarks, what I'd like to do very quickly, there's a forward-looking disclosure. You can see the document there. It's the same you'll see for any of these town halls, but also in corporate decks as well. Please, at your own leisure, take a time and read through that. But what I'd like to do is give you a little bit of a lay of the land before we start getting into questions. Being in the chat function here, you'll see that you can put your comments in. I'd really love to hear where you're commenting from. So please, your name and the city that you're from, we'd love to see that. John is the first one in there. Appreciate that very much. And that's where you're going to be having your chat. But understand as well, that's not where you're going to be having your questions. Right beside chat, you'll see Q&A. That's where you're going to put your questions. You can start putting them now. You can put them throughout this AMA as well. What's going to happen is that they're going to go through there. I will be publishing those as they go. All questions are on the table. Dennis and Mike have been very, very adamant about that, but just understand that we do ask for respect in these questions. It's very, very simple. And if there are certain things that don't have that, you won't see that question published, but all other questions, whether constructive, positive, and everything in between, we want to be able to get to and very excited to do so. So please go into that Q&A function. And with that being said, Dennis, I'm going to send it over to you for opening remarks, and then we'll jump right into the questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Brandon. And thanks for everyone that took the time today to learn more about our story and what we're working on. And Brandon, I like the intro just about, reminding everyone there is no question that's too tough. I think we're in a really interesting time as a company. And people, I say, why are you doing this? Why do you, and I guess there's a couple points I would make just to kick it off. There is zero doubt that there is a short and distort, attack on our company. Shorting the market is one thing, but people just need to understand that it is illegal to take a short position and then spread, lies and things we believe are both malicious and, intentional for their personal gain. And so today we're not going to deal with all that. As I said previously, IROC and the OSC and SEC in the US are all working on that. I got a great report from both organizations in Canada on that late last week. And I feel really good that people that are worried about that stuff are doing their job and looking out for our shareholders. So I wanted today to be just an awesome reset, not focused on the share price, zero control over that. What we control is creating shareholder value through revenue, through the business development, through the data and the pursuit of what we're building as a company. And, people, this idea that, oh, wow, we're going to do something live. I have never, ever come on to a show, camera, interview ever and done a second take. So people should know that. Why? I remember there was one I even said MVMD incorrectly 3 times. And, you have those days, we're human, but it didn't say let's redo it. I want people to know that Mike and I and the team that stands behind us are here for shareholders. We're transparent, and there's nothing I'd like more than to just understand, if there's any questions, where they're coming from, let's get this behind us. And then more importantly, get focused on what we're excited about and what we think our shareholders should learn about. So that's my tee up. I think we can jump right in. Maybe what I'll do is give everyone, in case you're new to Mountain Valley, the 30-second elevator overview, like what are we, what do we do? And then, with that being the context, Brandon, fire away. They don't have to be in any order. And I'll just remind people, I have not seen a single question. I have no idea what's coming, but I do know that you guys deserve to hear from us firsthand, again, as I said, about what we're excited about. So Mountain Valley, amazing work we do. We're a biotech company. We're in our infancy. We went public through a reverse takeover early in 2020 last year, February. And in that time frame, we have achieved what I believe more than any other biotech company on earth has achieved in its pace and its scale. We have our original founding technology in the desiccated liposome space. So we've worked on molecules, embedding complicated molecules into easily absorbed, rapidly absorbed technologies. We've recently invented, late last year with Mike and his team, some solubilization techniques that we've patented and are moving forward. We'll talk, I'm sure questions will come out. But again, solubility is the holy grail of drugs. And in this particular drug class, we have some really innovative and novel approaches we're doing. We have a dose-sparing adjuvant that we've worked on. Those results are coming out. And so that hypothesis is really simple. Doing less with a vaccine, so using 1/10 or 1/20th, has all sorts of advantages. And then our final technology is in cold chain. So how do we now take drugs and vaccines and enable them to be distributed in less stringent cold chain environments to get to the people in generally the most disadvantaged nations on earth? So that's what we do as a company. Our story is big. We have lots of moving pieces, but what you should know around our business model is that we take molecules, and our proposition is that we would enable the top performing partners in its class to license our technology to make existing drugs, vaccines, and nutraceuticals better. That's what we do.
Absolutely. I appreciate that very much, Dennis and Mike, coming up for the questions. We're going to jump right into it. And two things I wanted to mention very quickly to all of our attendees today. Do me a favor, and everyone here as well, before publishing a question, just quickly read through to see if your question is there. I've seen a few duplicates, which is perfectly fine, because what you can do, if you see the same one that you're going to ask, you can actually upvote it. Instead of asking it again, you can upvote it. It'll go higher into the queue, but we'll go from the very top and we'll start working our way down. There's going to be quite a few coming in. Very excited to begin. Dennis, I'm going to jump right in here.
Awesome.
Okay, so going over to the questions here. The very first question is from Frank Gallo, Richmond Hill, Ontario, April 28th. I saw Mike Farber on NBC News in LA describing a pill Pfizer is developing to treat COVID-19. Since it was odd that Mike Farber would be speaking on behalf of Pfizer, and the description was very much similar to the treatments MVMD are currently developing, can you tell us if MVMD is in discussion with Pfizer on potential partnerships?
Yeah, so that is a great question to start with. So we have NDAs with our pharma partners, but I can honestly say Pfizer is not one of them. We're doing zero work with Pfizer. I think there's some interesting overlap. How Mike got in that position and on that show was we're starting to get a lot of mainstream media reaching out and asking for our expertise as we're starting to see results and such. So Mike and I sort of laughed afterwards because there's no doubt it was strange how they qualified. It was a very immediate, hard-hitting kind of interview style. So there wasn't a lot of context that I think when that ended, we sort of looked at each other and went, oh, okay, wow, we didn't really get in. So most times, and maybe it's a bit more in my wheelhouse to say, here's the Mountain Valley proposition. Mike, I think, did a pretty good job understanding our competitors and what we do. But I would say Pfizer, no conversations with them. And in fact, could be a competitor with the therapeutic, although I don't think their price points will be anything near marketable, given what we're seeing with Ivermectin.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that. And I agree with you too. Look, people need to understand there's other ways of fighting COVID, and there will be oral applications. Hence why hopefully some of those viewers are now wondering, who is Mike Farber, and looking more into Mountain Valley.
Yeah.
The next question is coming from Kyle. I believe there may be multiple questions here. So one moment here. He states, I understand that the Bangladesh trial started on April 23rd. Was scheduled for 30 days, which would end around May 23rd. Can you provide an updated timeline on when the results will be back? It is multiple questions, so I'll stop with that.
Yeah, so I can take a crack at that one really quick. So commencing a trial doesn't mean you start on day one. You start the trial, you go through the protocol work. In the Bangladesh trials in particular, we had our product tied up at customs for over 2 weeks. So we had a really interesting start. But that being said, you can maybe, Mike, update us how close we are on that end.
So all of the animals have been dosed successfully. They were dosed without any incident, no adverse effects of any shape or form. They reacted very well, no pain. So across poultry, cattle, sheep, goat, all of them were dosed. We will now do, from the time that they were dosed, there's a 30-day draw of blood and of tissue to make sure that ivermectin is cleared and that these poultry and husbandry animal flesh can enter the markets the same way as flesh would do without these treatments. So this will take 30 days from the time the dose was affected, which I believe was around the 15th. So readouts on all of the tissue samples will be probably done on the last day, the 30th day, which would be the 15th of June. And then you would have the analysis, the LCMS analysis of ivermectin residues. So we're scheduling probably around 25 to 30 days from now. We'll have all of the rationale. It's also important to point out that the Ministry of Fish and Agriculture and also the Health Ministry are taking part in Bangladesh in overseeing and providing personnel that did this study, so that this will allow us to immediately segue into market approvals in Bangladesh for animal husbandry in across the board of all the animals that we've treated.
Fantastic. Well,
Brandon, I have to just add, so we have seen videos of the application, and the one really quick build is, so people may not realize we're looking at a needleless applicator. Although it can be injected in a normal needle, there's a really amazing footage that we've seen where, you have, and then remember, you would not traditionally with a heavy gauge needle, these are usually administered under constraint with painkillers in a cattle and, large husbandry animals. So now we're seeing poultry and goat applications that you would swear it was just a flies on my neck. And then you even see, petting of the goat after and stuff. So I think there's going to be a really cool cruelty to animal story, that, being more humane as well as the benefits of that. So anyways, just a little side thing that we had seen that I think people will really enjoy when that footage gets out.
And up until now, the trial that we're doing in Bangladesh also proves the utility of ivectisol in poultry, which is an untapped market. There is no ivermectin currently being able to be applied properly and effectively into the poultry market. So it's a huge untapped market that we've now proven in this initial trial that works effectively dosing in poultry.
Fantastic. Well, I'm going to continue to go on with the questions here. I'm going to blend two questions as I go as well, because Morgan got upvoted right to the top, and it's very close to Kyle's second question, which is, can you provide an overview of the revenue potential for each lane you're currently working on? That is Kyle's question, and Morgan's is almost identical. If all trials are successful, when do you see the company producing significant revenues?
Wow, that's an awesome question. So we have a lot of lanes, so I'll do my best to maybe rank them in a sense. So what Mike was just describing in husbandry animals, we've done what I would call napkin budgets, because part of it's dependent on the partner, the markup, how they choose to go to market. There's even candid discussions about it becoming mandated inside certain countries, as an example, as one of the potential go to markets. Remember, in countries like Bangladesh, 1 in 5 husbandry animals die, and it has a direct relationship to GDP. And so there's a fairly sophisticated model we've been looking at in that. But let me just give you a sense by dosing. So opening up the market, we've said previously, in roastery chickens, duck, you start to go after this small husbandry class of animals today that can't be injected. We're talking up to 70 billion animals per year in the global marketplace. And so you now start to imagine new injections, and then the way ivectisol will be administered is by the dose, by the size of the dose. So it'll be more expensive, obviously, per kilo for cattle and swine. It'll be much cheaper for poultry, as an example. So our forecast, when you start to do 70 billion as the new market cap plus over 100 billion animals globally, the market share doesn't take a whole lot to get excited about, the revenue potential there. So that one fits very high. on what would we be looking at, and has near-term commercialization discussions. The other parallel would be COVID as an example. So Ivectisol, we've just come off the BSL-4 trials. What would that look like? And so when you start to now imagine, we have two phases that we're quite far along on here. One is going after the generic ivermectin space. So Ivectol is a product that we are doing trial runs right now, candidly, inside Bangladesh. And that's just Mountain Valley branded Ivectol that has nothing to do with our solubilization technique. But we know there's an immediate need and a global shortage. And we've already secured the API, from a cost production standpoint. Where will that be used? How will that be used? We've got a couple of things you'll hear hopefully very soon on. But we're working on deals to help stop the spread of COVID in third world countries, focused on the continent of Africa squarely inside Bangladesh. And that will evolve into our Ivectisol product, Sol standing for the solubility. So we imagine, fast tracking human rapid dissolve wafers, which we've already proven use 1/5 of the API ivermectin and 1/8 in the injectable format. So now, we want to be the proxy for frontline emergency use authorization, preventing someone from going onto a ventilator. And then we want to be, known as the vitamin C, as I've said previously, in cabinets that you could take as a community to stop the outbreak of a COVID. Very similar to what we're seeing in India right now, as an example. And with the new variants and all the things that are happening, we believe there will be a massive business opportunity. What does that look like? Okay, so let's just take, the continent of Africa. 1.4 billion people population-wise. What does it look like to administer? Some of our initial work that we're in a business development lane on right now, starting in even the West African countries. That would look like 400 plus million people population. Ivermectin would be dosed to 75% of the population based on age. That's the market we're going after at a percentage markup. Again, everything adds up to 500 million to $1 billion and onwards. So very significant revenue, and we're working extremely hard on deals. I've alluded to that in the past. We're candidly finalizing an MOU right now on this exact topic. So all of that, just to give you context, will be dwarfed. And Mike, maybe I'll just to change my voice, peel back cancer slightly and where that looks like as a company for us.
Okay, so cancer, as we know, in the last decade has undergone a fairly big revolution with the advent of what are called checkpoint inhibitors. These are chemicals that utilize the body's or upgrade the body's immune system by interfering with certain proteins that bind between tumor cells and the body's immune cells that recognize these tumor cells. Checkpoint inhibitors have revolutionized cancer, but most people don't realize that checkpoint inhibitors work on a very small percentage of cells that exhibit these checkpoint proteins. So in the case of, let's say, PD-1, programmed death ligand, only 20% of tumors in, let's say, triple negative breast cancer express this protein. So a great drug like Keytruda, a blockbuster drug, a real revolutionary drug from Merck, is only able to treat cancers that express these checkpoint proteins above a certain level so that the drug is effective. Now, if you understand that ivermectin can now come along and synergize with these drugs to allow the immune system to recognize the tumors that don't express these checkpoint proteins. So now what you're saying is that if you can only treat 20% of the people with the checkpoint inhibitor, but now you upregulate the other people through ivermectin so that they basically get the same treatment as the people who have the checkpoint inhibitors, you've now increased your market by 4 times. So a drug like Keytruda is scheduled to sell around $25 billion per year. Making it available to so many more people in need who are suffering from these, let's say, metastatic melanoma, non-small cell lung cancer, triple negative breast cancer, where the majority of people cannot now be treated effectively by checkpoint inhibitors. And now you allow them to be treated effectively. You're talking about a potential that is worth even a small percentage of that $100 billion increase a year in sales would be a remarkable amount of money. And there are instances where other companies have come along with adjuvants, cancer adjuvants, and have been paid billions of dollars upfront after phase 1 trials that were successful. And this is why we're now pursuing very rapidly 3 preclinical trials in these very well-known cancers: triple negative breast cancer, metastatic melanoma, and non-small cell lung cancer. These are the major causes of cancer death. They are the most populous cancers and tumors. And we believe that the number of abstracts that have already shown ivermectin works against these cancers leads us to believe that what we're doing in terms of intratumoral injections will even be more successful than what's been done to date. So this is what we're doing. We're setting the groundwork to enable us to then transition very quickly into a phase 1 trial and prove it in a human model that we basically have something that will revolutionize the work of checkpoint inhibitors on a much broader population.
Right. So if I were to relate that just quickly back to the question. So Mike started to allude, when we can make the best-selling drugs in the world better and increase their market size, how is that done? Well, now I think Keytruda, as an example, has a 5-year patent life. Now you can overlay our injectable ivermectin, which, as Mike described, could be injected directly in a tumor. You've now created a 20-year patent for them or a company like them. We won't be too picky on the value that we create in the marketplace, but we know it'll be aligned with our mission of creating better life in the world and stopping the scourge of cancer. So, if I were to, I would say cancer, there's no sheet that I could even start to draw that doesn't start a $5 billion opportunity for this company. And then you start to extrapolate that out over the market size that Mike alluded to. We're very, very optimistic about progressing the science of that and what it could create. People have challenged, I've been asked before about, hey, you say we're one of the most undervalued stocks. Well, why is that? Well, even these 3 that I just described, we haven't even started talking about the others, have very significant transformational benefits in both reducing cost and increasing life. And we know there's a sweet spot in there financially for what our company's doing. The only other comment I would say really quickly, the dose-sparing adjuvant, again, using 1/10 of a current vaccine, its application across all the vaccine space is significant. Cold chain, I've gone on record before, there's over 17 billion in transportation logistics. Those wouldn't be eliminated, but they'd be dramatically reduced. There's 35 billion in wastage per year in the vaccine space. That would be dramatically shifted with our technique in cold chain. And, our desiccated liposome, which is the sort of the core, is enabling overlap in a lot of our technologies. And its own right has, multi-billion dollar applications that we're working through. So we're a biotech company. Do we have this perfect roadway to deliver everything? Of course, we're going to learn. We're going to learn from our results trial, but there's no one more committed than this group of change makers that will figure it out. We fail fast. We keep moving in the direction, and we're incredibly excited about the revenue potential for our company.
Appreciate the very detailed answer there. And Kyle, I know you have a couple more questions in this list, but we have an overwhelming amount of questions coming in. So I'm going to come back to you. I'm not going to delete that comment. I'm going to keep it there. Hopefully we can get back to the very end, because there are some ones that are coming in that are getting even more votes. So we're going to go there. So people, please, if you're going through those questions, you really want to know that answer, we'd love to see that up, folks. That means it's very important to a lot of you. This one's coming from Kevin. Do you anticipate MVMD being uplisted to the TSX by July of 2021?
Okay, this is a very interesting question. So I'm going to give you full disclosure here. We had announced a TSX venture uplisting. We're midstream on that process. The reality is I've had 2 meetings now during this process with the Neo exchange. And in fact, I had a 45-minute call just yesterday with Josh, the CEO. One of the challenges that we've addressed in the short attacks is the high frequency trading algorithms that are beating the current systems that are very challenging on the CSE, candidly, and equally challenging, we believe, on the TSX and TSX Venture. So we still have to regroup as a board. I've personally made up my mind based on that valuation that I likely will recommend that we stop the venture application. We go right to the main board, which is, companies leave the TSX to go to Neo, to be candid. So what I love about Neo was founded to help companies like ours directly give us the data we need for enforcement of short attacks and illegal activity. And it applies what I would describe as speed bumps in high frequency trading algorithms that manipulate stocks towards the end of the day and opening shines a very bright light on layering and spoofing techniques that are illegal that just seem to happen. So awesome question. I wish I could just be saying, here's what it is. It's all aligned with our desire to uplist, but I'm taking a very slight pause. And as I said, we'll be recommending to the board probably by the end of today that we pivot course and go after something that's bigger and protects us even more. And as we go through the next phases of growth, I want to do everything I can to protect our shareholders from these similar tactics in the future.
Once again, appreciate that answer there, Dennis. This next question is coming from Nick. Hi, my question for Dennis. When can we expect the cold chain results? What level of revenue are you expecting from this? And are there any deals on the table with bigger organizations like Pfizer, which you've already answered? But he says, thank you. I'd love to know that. Big fan of your work and big fan of the company.
Okay, good. So so this is another really, it's a question. It doesn't surprise me to get this question, candidly, because my own expectation was we would have already announced the cold chain results. So here's what I'm going to just tell you candidly and transparently. We have already in-house received the cold chain results. What people don't know, and I'm going to just put on the table candidly today, we are in the midst of negotiating a collaborative research agreement with the FDA. We've already had a legal review of contract on our end. We've sent that back almost a week and a half ago now. It's going through their legal and their departments. And through this collaborative research agreement, it's a 2-year agreement we're working towards. It will define the progress, the gates that we're moving against this particular project moving forward. And it also sets the ground rules for public disclosure and how we operate. So I can comfortably say, I'm very excited about what we're doing and the progress that we're working through with the FDA. We have a very minor step that is one that I didn't foresee coming, but you should just understand as shareholders that it's a very positive step. And although it caught me on the delay, because I had never seen that would be something that would have prevented us from communicating the news to the marketplace, I love the process. And I appreciate the desire to do deeper, more intertwined things in the future and under collaborative agreement. So hopefully that gives you just as candid and honest answer as I can at this stage.
Yeah, and Dennis, I'm going to go into another question here. It's partially answered, but I like the form of it, and so is everyone else. It's been up at the very top. So this is from Robin. Good morning, Dennis. Given the fact that MVMD has no revenue to date, could you tell the shareholders how and when you see this coming to fruition? Also, if revenue is not foreseen in the near future, do you see any necessity for MVMD to raise additional funds for future growth by means of issuing more shares to the public or institutional investors?
Okay, great questions. So let me start with the raise, the cash flow on hand. So today we have over $18 million in the bank in cash. We've paid for all our current trials that are underway. That's frankly our number one expenditure, although it's something we're in a lot of control because we decide the molecules and the business development effort against that. We have a very low burn rate, so I don't see any immediate need to raise any capital, candidly. And we're well funded, what I would describe as almost indefinitely at this stage. Cancer is going to bring up some really interesting funding opportunities. I've already been in conversations with potential government-related grants and foundations. So there's some interesting cash injection it's non-dilutive, and with no dilution with capital that comes in to fund the type of change that we're trying to make in the healthcare system, that would obviously be very favorable for us, knowing how that impacts our shareholders. So hopefully that answers the latter part of the question. The first part of the question on revenues, the nearest revenues fall into two areas. I think Mike did a pretty good job reminding people that we are sitting with government entities at the table in Bangladesh, participating in the design and implementation of the trials. The reason that is, it's because of the mind of commercialization. So I won't naively say, in fact, I'll answer this question, even it probably will be asked, like, what have I failed at? Without a doubt, my optimism and the pace we're moving at. I communicate these 30-day timelines, and then I learn something, it's 45 days, and the whole world's working under COVID. So that's for sure a learning for me as a CEO that's driving the type of intensity. So Bangladesh is no different. We're moving incredibly fast. Even something as simple as delay of getting our solubilized ivermectin for the trial into the country. Those are learnings for us that, now we've got a new process for how we do that. But the punchline to the revenue is we have people that are extremely motivated. So I see very near-term commercialization, even if they're pilot projects that will start generating immediate revenue. Very comfortably see that inside 90 days. The second part of it, as I've alluded to, the work we're doing within some of the, particularly in the continent of Africa, that is also a very near term. We have, don't forget, our generic ivermectin. We have an immediate humanitarian need to start, no different than the outbreaks in India, to protect some of these third world countries. That's aligned with the DNA that we're doing. Those revenues, again, easily can be imagined with inside 90 days if things unfold as we are. We're already going down GMP produced Ivectisol, which is critical for human trials. So when you start to stack timelines, and man, I tell you guys, I am relentless with the team. If you ask anyone, and I'm sure Mike's, we cannot buy time. We can always raise money, although we don't need to. I am relentless. And people need to understand, we put in 80-hour weeks in. We have a corporate apartment across the street that I spend 2 or 3 nights myself in. And Mike lives there full time, even though he's a US resident. No one here is taking any shortcuts on time. And so even now, how do we get into producing GMP Ivectisol so we can already now foresee human trials? We're already ahead on that intersection. So I won't ramble on that particular question. If we get a chance, I'll tell you a bit more about cancer and phase 1 and in the work we're doing, but hopefully that answers your question. Very near-term revenues.
Yeah, and speaking of your cancer element with ivermectin, we've talked about COVID, we've talked about Bangladesh, we've talked about a bunch of different avenues and people that you were working with. John's question here is: would it be possible for you to show more of your operation, your staff, your labs, or show that there is more than a couple of faces that are Mountain Valley?
Yeah, I think of course, early on, and perhaps it's my own challenge, the precision of what we say, how we say it. As soon as we realized the ability for words to be twisted, I wouldn't put too many people in this chair, candidly, knowing how tough it is to say things. As I've described myself, sometimes I haven't even said the acronym of our own company accurately. And there's a humanitarian, or a human side, to what we say and do. But I don't disagree. Can we showcase some of our staff better? There's a very talented right hand to Mike, Richa, who's a female. She's now starting to get asked to do some interviews and stuff. I think she would be a really amazing person to showcase. So I think you'll see a bit more of that as we work through this challenge with precision. And then our operations as a formulation lab. We have a very cool office environment, very change maker collaborative. So I think showing people a bit more of that, I'll take that to heart and see how we can do that across our social channels.
Yeah, I believe the investors also, because if you're doing trials with cancer and you're doing trials with ivermectin and with poultry, and you're doing trials, these BSL level 4 lab trials and things like that, I think what he's alluding to is, do you have the staff to be able to really do all these trials at once, or is it just the two of you? Or I think expanding upon the relationships with Tulane University and all of them would be important here, I believe.
Yeah. So Mike, why don't you just tell them about how we scale? And
so as in research and development, the first thing you do is you qualify what you've discovered. You then figure out if this can be then pushed forward into clinical or preclinical trials. The first step is preclinical trials. So then what you do is you find out the best people to partner with in the specific area that you're working with. So let's look at the adjuvant, the novel adjuvant, the nanoparticulate aluminum adjuvant that we have at Tulane. So what we've done is we've partnered with Tulane University, Dr. Elizabeth Norton and Dr. John Clements, who have 30 years experience in vaccinology and in adjuvant development and adjuvant testing. And then you find the right partner. To do that all in-house, you would need dozens of staff. You need to have labs for each of the things that we're developing. The same thing in cancer. We have a CRO for preclinical trials in cancer who have decades of expertise, have 20 PhDs on staff. They have surgeons, veterinary surgeons, and they're skilled in doing this. We do the basic research development. We understand the basic science. We then hire the best teams to translate that both preclinically, and eventually we'll hire the best team to translate that clinically. Doing it all in-house, we would need hundreds of people. We would have a burn rate of tens of millions of dollars a month, and we would always be diluting our stock like many biotechs do. It's much better to find teams that have decades of experience, who know what they're doing, and can add to the quality of work that we hope to achieve through their experience. So we learn a lot by interacting with these teams. They even tell us, no, this is not the right way. You should look at this, or maybe you want to add this because that will test out this theory in a better way. So we go out and we find the right partners to bring these forward. And these people have wealths of experience that add to our own basic knowledge. So the whole idea is to start with the basic research, understand the potential of that research, and then to find the right teams, outsourcing them to bring it forward.
And thank you for that. I think that's perfect. I believe that's what he's alluding to. Like, how can you do all of these different trials all at once? You just heard how and what you've been doing. Moving on to Lucas's question here. With all the censorship from the US government, social media platforms like Twitter and the like surrounding ivermectin, do you feel that big pharma will try to downplay or silence any positive results from your current studies and efforts with ivermectin?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Our focus right now is not relying on that political landscape. So fast tracking our work in countries that satisfy both our humanitarian DNA as a company, but also suppress a lot of the political relationships of where things are financed and the business objective of big pharma. I've said this before, we're pursuing molecules that will make a difference. We're not pursuing molecules based on how profitable they are. I know when we do it right, profits will easily follow. And we just alluded to, billions that are available in each of these lanes. Maybe the most, sensitive thing I would say is when you understand today that the current vaccines that are in the marketplace, none of them would be allowed to be administered outside of the emergency use authorization if ivermectin was free flowing as a therapeutic in the marketplace. So there's a lot to be understood about that. And I don't need to get into the accusations of it, but when you follow the money, you understand that there's a lot at stake in this, multi-billion dollar playground. So we're not taking that on. We don't need to take that on. There's lots of organizations that are focused on that. Our applications are grounded with government support, working directly with ministries of health, both inside Bangladesh and in some West African countries. And you're going to hear some great news as we continue to develop that out that aren't mired in the political controversy of that.
Well said, and excited to hear. We'll continue on here with Andrea. Sid Sinroy became an advisor to the company on December 14th, 2020. It is well known that Mr. Sinroy is the president of RevDev, a services-based company in the biopharmaceutical industry. Sid Sinroy is also an advisor to Polation Health Investment, a company that has recently incorporated for the purpose of effecting mergers, share exchange, asset acquisition, share price, and organization in the therapeutics sector of healthcare. Very detailed question, by the way. Based on the above, it is very clear that Mr. Sinroy is well connected to the big pharma industry. During MVMD's initial discussions with Mr. Sinroy, could you provide insight on any recommendations or advice that Mr. Sinroy offered Mountain Valley? Could you let us know what his initial sentiment was upon those first introductions and where the sentiment lies today? That's a fantastic question.
Well, it's a statement as much as a question. I couldn't have said the front end better myself. So the best way to answer that question, I'll give you another really transparent, candid answer. So we had a strategy session with Sid last Wednesday, and our square focus of that. This will just give you a little insight. So first of all, that organization that you described that he heads up, it's made up of 650 global advisors, most with prior FDA experience, working globally in pharmaceutical development. So they're a powerhouse. So it's not a surprise that that's the type of change maker we want in our stable, if you will. Our very specific focus with Sid in that strategy session was on cancer and on phase 1 trials. Sid has personally overseen over 60 phase 3 clinical trials on cancer alone. And so if you wanted me to connect the dots more clearly than that, I don't think I can. Without a doubt, we will be leveraging the stable and expertise of Sid and his team to, there's many fatal flaws that companies at our stage would make without understanding, the talent and the pathway. And, Mike will recall in that conversation, even early engagement with the FDA in the consultation of the design of a phase 1 trial is a fatal make or break step that Sid and his team are well versed on. And so we have a punch list of things that we're going through as a team right now to optimize, because saying we're doing a phase 1 trial in humans, although we're getting the GMP production finalized and all of those pieces, we're going to use our money very intelligently with an optimized chance of precision and success. So it gives you a very current peek, literally a week old, of how Sid is sitting at our table and helping us. Sid's questions, as you would expect, what I would clarify from that question as well, the only other thing that comes to mind, we're not relying on Sid for business development. Sid's for sure one of the most connected pharma guys in our stable. But our ask of Sid isn't like, oh, please get us a meeting, please get us a meeting. Those meetings are not difficult to get as we pursue data. Data is the holy grail in pharma. And as a biotech company, all of our actions are driven in the pursuit of data. Sid, anyone could phone. I could phone and say, hey, we've got some cool stuff. And in the current pharma relationships we've already got in discussions under NDA. That data is not going to be difficult to present. So Sid will play a role in that, but I just wanted to clarify in the way that question was asked. We're not relying on one guy to go out and shop our technology. We're at a point now as we've pivoted into a lot more mainstream media coverage. A lot of our efforts in the pursuit of data are paying off, and our press releases alone are getting traction where organizations are reaching out to start very interesting conversations. Mike and I, this morning over coffee, I have a very interesting partnership that was scheduled on my calendar for next Wednesday. World-class partner, someone that you would be very envious to even work with. That stuff's happening naturally when we pursue data.
Once again, appreciate the very detailed answers, and much of which I've been an investor for 3 years in this company, much of which I've never heard before. So I appreciate that as well. This question is coming from Vic. We spent a lot of time on technology and different pathways. This one's coming back to the share price and the stock. Is there any truth to Anson funds and other shorters? Forgive me, the question there. Is there any truth to Anson funds and others shorting the stock? Is that true? And should we, as shareholders, be concerned about that?
Yeah, so I can't comment on the architecture of it. There's some very textbook plays that some in the industry would point to, 2 or 3 houses that do this MO. And, and I'd say the IROC and OSC investigations, those investigations were already underway before Mountain Valley. So I could just kind of leave it at that. So I have zero accusations and zero need to point out who and why are my own personal hypothesis. But what I will speak to is the MO. And the MO is very, very consistent. And it's a pattern that is almost grade 9 detective work. So I'm surprised it's so effective. But you have an anonymous short report that's generated in a very small group of Twitter accounts. So in this particular case, this Night Market Research, it's fully anonymous, quoting anonymous sources. And then there's an amplification by Seeking Alpha and an individual in particular there that's textbook claiming they've reached out to the company. And then I saw it on another fellow Canadian company, the exact same. They literally just change a couple words. And so there's some, I could shine a bright light onto the MO and how obvious and how ridiculous it is in the structure of the attack. So should shareholders be worried? Here's what shareholders would be worried about. If any of it was true, which none of it is, it's all distorted. And they'd be worried how these companies win is they create panic among current shareholders. Hopefully today people can use their own brains and realize, how does this investment fit in their portfolio? I would be the first to say startup biotech companies should be a risk capital play for anyone. You need to have a financial advisor that understands where does the role of technology companies that work on breakthroughs fit inside your portfolio. It means absolutely nothing to me whether a shareholder stays or leaves inside Mountain Valley, outside of the personal sentiment that if you're doing it because you're believing short reports, I find that troubling and concerning, because I think someone, has robbed you of the joy that you get of, fitting this into your portfolio. Where shorters win is when companies fail to deliver revenue and fail to deliver on the business. I have gone on record saying my number one skill and strength is executing on the business. There's not one single thing I have ever said this company will do that we haven't done. And that is, I think, a very important thing. And as Mike described, the change makers that we attract, what he learns, what he contributes to those discussions, I get a lot of excitement about what we're building and where we're headed. The final point I would make about where shorters win is when they run companies out of money. We don't need to raise money at this point. The company's not for sale at this point. There's zero barometer of that share price. It has absolutely no impact at all to our ability to continue to operate. We're not looking to raise money and we're not selling at this price. So it's a completely irrelevant scoreboard that all of this I am very confident we'll look back. I don't care if the share is trading at a penny or trading at $10. That is still not a scoreboard that anyone on our team should be concerned about inside the company. And shareholders who invested properly with the advice of where we fit into their portfolio, you should feel very excited about the journey that we're on together.
Yeah, I think that's a very important aspect that you mentioned there, Dennis, in terms of understanding the risk profile of various different investments. Because when you are a biotech company like you've stated, and we all know that you are, there's that period in which there's time where you're looking to prove out results, you're looking to prove out trials, and smart investors who are looking to push down a price or to short a company understand that, unfortunately, and they prey upon it, and they prey upon emotions. And just to reiterate everything you just said there, try to pull those emotions out, speaking from an investor here, and look at, are they moving forward? Are the trials coming back? BSL level 4 trials have already come back, et cetera, et cetera. Understand what you're investing. Understand these things take time. So I appreciate your answer there, Dennis.
Yeah.
Going on to the next question we have from Jeff. This is for yourself, Mike. Where did Mike get his science degree? A lot of talk on message boards has put this into question, and we would like some clarification from Jeff from Toronto.
You wanted to, so let's talk about experience and degrees. And if anybody took the time to Google my name and see the patents that I have under my name, you'll see a vast amount of experience, not only just with formulation. Again, these, what people have alluded to is that I have one or two patents. I have series of patents. And if you look at these patents, if in depth, you'll see that I invented a novel class of nitric oxide donating molecules called the nitric oxide ethyl esters. So this is an amino acid. So these are a class of molecules that I invented myself. They were proven out. They went through preclinical safety. All of that was done. I have numerous patents on formulation, numerous patents on liposome technology. And currently in Mountain Valley, we have 15 patents that have been approved and are pending. And we plan to file several more across the broad spectrum of research that we're doing. So this speaks to the broad base of my knowledge. It speaks to the amount of technology that I've been able to develop and the amount of technology that's been recognized as both novel, effective, and innovative by the USPTO and other governments across the world. So I think in terms of asking me about my background, I think that speaks volumes to what I'm capable of doing. The same way that we now have new patents pending on solubilization of macrocyclic lactones that hasn't been able to be achieved for the last 30 years, I think speaks even more volumes to what we're accomplishing as a team in Mountain Valley. Mountain Valley has given me the ability to even improve upon the novelty of things that I'm inventing, the scope of the things that I'm able to do. So I just want to say that Mountain Valley has given me the opportunity to do things that in my career at this point, I didn't think I would be doing. And I'm really thankful for Mountain Valley for that. But the questions about my background, I think, are answered very easily by people who would do some type of research on their own and just look at the depth of my knowledge and the depth of what I've invented over the last 20 years. Simple.
It's interesting, Brandon. I would build on this. So this education topic, it's funny. This was one of the principal anchor points, even in that short and distort report, somehow trivializing skill and ability based on, this 3 or 4 year period in someone's life. So, my reaction to education, one of my favorite authors is Seth Godin, and he says it in a brilliant way because today there's not many jobs where your boss has all the answers, and he goes on to describe an education system that's based on leadership and problem solving. They're the two most fundamental skills of every job in life and how you, even your own fulfillment. And I've seen the shots about my own education. He went to Humber, and as if I'm some sales guy or something. If people really want to know about my education, so yeah, I graduated with the Dean's Honor Roll. I was vice president of Students Council. Humber has 70,000 students. I was vice president of Students Council, managed a $500,000 operating budget, had a large office overlooking the student center, trying to drive all sorts of change in that environment. So even in that example, as much as it was attempted to make us look like we're somehow not qualified what we do, I changed the healthcare system at Humber. I brought birth control at the time to the campus. There's just all of these things in a way that while I was going to school, I did that too. And I think it speaks in spades about our ability to problem solve, attract change makers in a way that is so irrelevant that you would even define that education is somehow this class-driven thing. And maybe the final point I would make is if people saw the interview process for the people that even work here, there's people that when they understand intensity, PhDs sitting in meetings looking to come onto our team that put their hands up and go, oh, I have no idea. This is not a book smarts environment. That's the table stakes, energy, the ability to problem solve. No one in this company has all the answers, testing knowledge. The abstracts, Mike will read 200 abstracts in a weekend and do things that, the stuff that I've learned from him. So anyways, I don't want to ramble about it, but I think it's a very narrow person that defines education as somehow a limiter to what's possible for a human being to excel in life.
Well said. I have a very similar story in there, but they didn't come to hear me. They came to hear from you too, but absolutely there. Sonia asked the next question, and forgive me as I clear my throat here. Is there a possibility of rolling out your Ivermectin products into the Canadian market in the very near future? Doctors do have the ability to prescribe off-label, but supply of Ivermectin in Canada is becoming more difficult to access.
Perfect for 505.
Yes, if you're looking for approvals, the first thing, and easier to get approval in the US and again, a bigger market. So as we put out in a press release, I think it's a month and a half ago, we are working with Camargo to advance our Ivectisol sublingual tablet into a 505(b)(2) pathway and to get it approved. We believe that this is, the fastest way. We'll probably have to do a pharmacokinetic, a PK equivalency, which would be normal that the government would ask that. Again, as Dennis alluded to, we are already working on the GMP product of Ivectisol to go into the sublingual, to go into the human trials in a broad range of things that we're now looking at, and partners are approaching us to look at too in their own trials in humans. So this is basically how we would approach it. Canada would not be top on our list, the US, but again, even the US would be slower than things like we're doing in animal husbandry in Bangladesh, as Dennis mentioned previously.
Well, I know you guys can't see these questions, but that lined it up perfectly because the next question is speaking. Oh, it just got moved there. Is coming from Mike. Assuming a positive outcome in Bangladesh, how soon do you anticipate revenue? Will you be manufacturing and selling Ivectisol, or will you be licensing? Finally, how quickly do you believe you can ramp this up in 2021 and beyond based on forecast demand?
So I think we've answered the first and latter part of that question already. But what is the business model? So our business model generally is to take a molecule and license it with a partner by territory, by time. That's our best business model. Ivermectin has opened up a really interesting lane for us that we think we can move faster with our own production agreements and satisfying a market where we're sharing in that revenue model. So that particular question does break, my normal rules around how we're going to do it. So generally, just to be really clear, we would take it, license it to a partner and then teach them to fish and let their world-class structure take over. With Ivectisol in particular, we are going much more direct into the market, not exclusively direct, but the things we're exploring give us front row seats in that implementation.
Exciting to hear. And I know there's another question coming up. I saw it somewhere in this queue. I'll come back to it though, speaking about more on that, but a different angle, but hopefully we'll get to it in just a moment here. This next question is from Matthew. Did you seek out Dr. Norton, Dr. Clements, and all the other doctors or scientists that are involved in your research? If not, how did they come to work with your technology? Is there any chance you are working in partnerships with institutions such as the Gates Foundation?
That's a really interesting question. So when I was researching polio vaccines, Dr. Chumakov and his lab are the top lab in the world. They developed the ELISA test, which basically validates how much D antigen you're preserving in the vaccine. So this would be the normal person that we would want to partner with. And I approached him, talked to him about what we hoped to do, talked to him about what our vision was. And basically we came to an agreement to work together with the lab, that Dr. Chumakov's lab would perform the ELISA testing or perform the ELISA arrangements on our novel preparations. And there were, we put out press releases on what we've done that show only part of the work. There are many things like interference, a number of other things. So Dr. Chumakov's lab is testing a novel ELISA, and we get to basically be at the front row of the new ELISA that will come to the market, and they're validating it basically by testing it on our preparations. In terms of Dr. Norton and Dr. Clements, again, it was the same thing. The research that I did had pointed to Dr. Clements having 30 years in developing his own preparations and work that he had done in his own adjuvants on vaccines. And so he seemed to me to be very ripe he was retiring, but he seemed interested in what we were doing. When I presented the information on what our approach was, he thought it had scientifically was very sound. And so he was interested in collaborating, and that's how that started. In terms of other things, we've been approached by other companies that have relationships with the Gates Foundation. They're interested in looking at Ivectisol to go into their own preparations. And so that will, I think, bring up the interplay of Big Pharma, the Gates Foundation, and Ivectisol over the next few months.
Yes, it almost sounds like your work and your experience got you those relationships. I'm not sure they made you fax over your science degree for it, but glad to hear all those different things there. Moving on to Jordan here. Question one is multiple parts, and this is most likely for yourself, Mike. Question one, what further steps are required to bring the cold chain technology, results pending, of course, to commercialization with the polio vaccine? And I'll stop there and I'll do the second question after. So that might actually be a Dennis, but for either of you.
Well, maybe I'll answer in the non-scientific part of that question. So if people understand what we've done and how we've evolved, in our most recent tests, we've taken a vial and have laid a thin film of the polio vaccine inside the vial under a technique. And then Mike can sort of speak to the commercialization process. And then, the hypothesis is that you can now ship that outside of cold chain, rehydrate it with distilled water locally in the market, and then administer it in the same needle application. So now that you understand the context, the ability to commercialize that and it being a proxy for other heat-sensitive vaccines, I'll let Mike sort of describe the nitrogen. The
first thing that we're doing is we develop a process that can fit into the commercialized process of vaccine production currently. So that's the first step. So then what we would then do is go out and seek a partner, one of the big producers of polio vaccines in the world, Serum Institute of India, Pasteur Institute. These are the big ones. We present our findings, how well we've preserved the D antigen, and then they would validate these results. They would then see how they could integrate the process into their own processes and how cost effective it could be. And then that would then have to go to the government agencies like the EMA and the other governments. That would then take approval, and then that would be taken forward into commercialization. So those are the steps that are necessary. First, validation to the point where we have the cold chain obviously overcome, and then presenting the way that it's manufactured to our partners, and then taking it forward into final approvals by the government and commercialization.
Well, that leads right into the second question then. Thank you for that. This is specific to the BSL-4 trial. It was reported that 2.5 milligrams was the affected dose. Is that 2.5 milligrams of ivectisol 1%, meaning the API dose of 0.025 milligrams?
Perfect.
No, in terms of, first of all, the BSL trials were murine trials, mouse model trials. So you dose ivermectin at a given amount of API per kilo of body weight. So a mouse was given 2.5 milligrams of ivermectin per kilo of body weight. Now, remember that when you take a murine model and translate that to the human model, you're using a 1:12 ratio. So 2.5 milligrams in a mouse model is the equivalent of 200 micrograms per kilo in the human model. So people have to understand that when you talk about trials, preclinical trials, you're using an animal model. And that translates at various body weights and various ratios of surface and body weight to the human model. So you have to take that into account when you do it. So in a human, that would be the equivalent of 200 micrograms per kilo having been dosed to affect the viral clearance.
Perfect. Thank you. The next question here, we're moving on to Jared. So we've answered this part. When will the cold chain results be coming out? We spoke about that prior, but we haven't spoke about this element. On the cold chain Instagram video, it was showing UNICEF. Why was that chosen?
Yeah, so that has come up a few times. That UNICEF is the perfect articulation of the real world of where vaccines fall down. And again, $35 billion a year in wasted vaccines, as people would find truly mind-boggling. You would just assume that they're getting where they're going. That video and that organization is very impactful. So that was really just to demonstrate the logistical real world where you have someone walking over a mountain at the end of a video with a cooler. These aren't like helicoptered in and deep freeze chest dropped in the middle. Like, it's just the real world. So I think there's a lot of empathy that comes out in those visuals, the work of a really amazing organization. And it's a direct application of how we see, making a difference to that money that's today, frankly, just wasted.
Yeah, and just as a heads up, I know we've blown past our 1 hour. If you guys are right, we have quite a few in here. We'll keep going until you say, hey, we got another meeting coming up.
Yeah, we'll prioritize this, Brandon, as long as I love every question to be answered, and if people have to leave, we can always post it as, on our site afterwards or whatever.
Absolutely. We'll keep going on. This is from Constantinos. What's happening with MVMD's cannabis licensing deals? Any news during the month of May? So a couple more days.
Yeah, so we're a little behind on this, but not far behind. Had a call on that topic just yesterday. One of the main, won't be a name anyone has not heard of when we get to announcing it, but they actually had COVID, and we navigated a little bit of a delay, but only by a week in that. That wasn't a big part of it. But we're very excited about where we're headed in that particular partnership. And so we're in good shape. I don't want to get too far ahead, but no reason to think that deal is not going to be announced soon. A little bit of a miss perhaps on our overall timeline, but I've already confessed I'm getting bad at that for my 2-week isms, but we're very close.
Well, this next question is coming from Kevin. In a recent interview, Dennis very briefly mentioned involvement with the work at McMaster. Can you tell us any more about that?
Yeah, so there's a couple angles to McMaster. They do some very specific project work for us. The one that I was likely quoting in my mind, though, was we've had over several months, some discussions on the Together trials, and that probably intersects with Mike's answer on the Gates Foundation. And we went through a process, candidly, where we were, I'm going to say this was several months. We've been working with the lead there who happens to head those trials. And for those that aren't familiar, they're headed out of McMaster, but the trials are either in South Africa or Brazil. We went far along, even as far as getting our Ivectisol approved for human trials inside the Together trials. What I will candidly say is a couple weeks ago, I made the decision from an ROI and cost structure relative to outcome, knowing the BSL trials were coming, that we have very little to prove in that category, given the lanes that are opening up very quickly for us inside the continent of Africa. So can't give you all of the detail of that, but that's very, very transparent, the work we were doing with them, and just made a business decision very late in the process as of a couple weeks ago.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I believe we've already answered this one too, but I'll ask it for the sake of making sure we are just going straight down this and just asking, how close are we to a revenue generating licensing deal or partnership, regardless of business vertical? Weeks, months?
Definitely months. If you think of the way I answered that already, I did throw in the 90-day thing. I don't feel that's unrealistic. And at minimum, the framework of revenue generating deals would be a realistic objective that would have the clarity that I think is fair.
Oh, I appreciate that. And lots to prove out and solve. And then once you do, that's when the fireworks begin. This next question is from Ryan. Where/when can we expect to view the interview with CBC and Forbes? And I'll elaborate to that. That was mentioned in several different chat rooms prior.
Yeah, so that's interesting because it would have to be someone that is close to me or that knows that I even did that interview. So there's two things. One is the Forbes. We actually didn't do an interview with Forbes. We were asked for commentary on a topic, and we don't have any control whether they choose to use our quote. So I don't know if they've progressed to any idea of using that, but we haven't certainly seen anything. The CBC interview is quite interesting because I did an hour-long interview with someone I'm a big fan of at the CBC, and I have no control over how or when that will be aired. But yeah, that interview did take place, and we're actually looking at a second interview very narrowly focused on Ivectisol and cancer. So maybe that'll even trump the first interview. I don't know. But at this point, I can acknowledge both of those things have happened, but no control over, the media license and what they might do.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, if I may expand on this, and maybe in a question lower down this list, but since we're on that topic of CBC, of Forbes, we spoke about NBC prior in this AMA. What is Mountain Valley currently doing to get out there in these various different publications in which, whether it be investors or quite frankly, just individuals can find out about all the things that you're working on? What are you doing on that front?
Yeah, so our website for sure is always the thing I would point people to. That's the best spot for information. All our current news releases are there and such. So today, we're a small startup, but by most stretch, we have a great market cap. We're well funded, but we're still in this infancy relative to very seasoned biotech companies. And, one of the tools that we use, I think quite effectively, is we'll send out a press release, and then we have a couple, what I would describe as IR partners that go deeper and unpack things that, press releases people don't realize are very who, what, when, where, why, that driven. They're non-promotional by very nature. They're just matter of fact, and here's what it is. The ability to provide texture and context, I really like. We do some work with proactive investors, Agoracom occasionally, Equity Guru. We will do some interviews with Jody Vance. It just provides color and context, is what I would call a deeper dive. So I think those things have been quite effective in just giving. I frankly think of them as business development. Why do we get inbound activity? How do people learn about us as they Google? These interviews start coming up. So they've been a very successful tool for us just to provide context on what we're doing. And I feel like it's a bit more behind the scenes. And then we have also engaged in publicist activity, because getting a press release, there's millions of press releases that go out. And so one of the things that I've been waiting for is, we want data in-house. Data is the holy grail. And so we're pursuing, all our trials now are starting to present data. That is now the final piece of the puzzle to start getting mainstream media coverage, where there's a story that you can differentiate yourself. You're not just someone in a pursuit of something. You're someone that has changed something. You've rewritten the rules of what's possible. And most of our technology falls into that category. So that's candidly another thing. We have efforts here in Canada and the US that are starting to get us, even that Forbes example, presenting us, with journalists that are writing articles on certain topics. And that's even how the Pfizer one came to light, because someone was doing something and we were pitching expertise across the spectrum. We don't control those. You just get interviewed as a subject matter expertise, your subject matter expertise being brought to light. And, so I think we're going to see more of that, coming. But that's what we do. We don't do a whole lot, but we realize getting our story out is important at this stage of our company.
Yeah, thank you. And just to all of the investors in here, just understand there's, I love seeing this personally. There's an overwhelming amount of questions in the new area for me to go through, and then in our actual publish as well. So bear with us if you haven't seen your question come up just yet, and search through here to see if there's other ones you want to see pushed up the top, because we will probably go until about 1 o'clock if we're able to. Dennis, it's good, another 45 minutes, but the way it's going is that we are not going to get to all of them. So we are going to go by the ones that continue to get voted up. That's what tells us that they're the most pressing on investors' minds. But do bear with us as I'm still publishing some of them. All great questions. It's just there's so many of them. But thank you for taking the time. The next question is coming from Mo. Hi, Dennis. Now that you know how successful MVMD is becoming, what part of the business is giving you the most trouble right now? What's the greatest area of opportunity?
That's we really haven't had many struggles. I'll be candid. We're a fast failure kind of company, so very little defines things that don't work out. I mean, there's probably 50 things if I were to think back over the last year where we group, frankly, in this boardroom and figure out what are the learnings, how do we do it. So very little stresses me. I think I said at the start, the giving shareholders the confidence. We're getting a lot of inbound traction, wondering, the barometer of share price. So I would say if I didn't just acknowledge that, I think that becomes a bit of a distraction. So again, it doesn't trouble me, but I do get energy from our shareholders, and I don't want to ever diminish the value of their money. And from my own portfolio, I treat it all as monopoly money because I'm not selling today. I'm invested long term. I believe this has tremendous upside. So I just want to be really careful how I say that. But I can honestly say there is not a single thing that I'm laying awake at night thinking about. We have so many avenues, and we have the right to fail. We have the right to pivot and change and do things. And when people understand our culture of the people we work with, the change makers, there's never something that's become an obstacle that stopped us. I don't know, Mike, do you have any, you don't lay awake at all very often either, but is there something you're going, oh my God, I'm nervous about?
No, honestly, I'm not really nervous. I mean, we're founded in science that has been created by other people. Even the liposome technology is 3 decades of experience in liposomes. If you look at ivermectin, there's 3 decades of safety. There's a dozen abstracts now proving its effectiveness in cancer as a synergist with checkpoint inhibitors. So the basis of our science, basically the only thing I really worry about is how good will we be? Will it meet the expectations that I put on myself and the rest of my team to really deliver something that we believe will be outstanding? So yeah, I mean, that's the type of things that keep me awake. And then the other thing is expanding our knowledge base, expanding our application base. I love the opportunities that I think we're going to be presented with. We have partners that are approaching us that I think are, as Dennis said, world-class partners that I think will give us added insights and added scope of what we can apply Ivectisol in the market. So I think that's just phenomenal. Do I look to basically, broach new frontiers with Ivectisol and other technologies? Yes. I'm already dreaming about the second generation of cancer treatments using Ivectisol and targeted treatments in places that Ivermectin can't go right now in the CNS. So these are things, I mean, they're not troubling. It's just, I just dream big and I want us to be able to accomplish that. So these are the things that keep me awake at night. Just what will our next challenge be, and how can we approach it, and how can we solve it?
Appreciate that very much. This next question is from Michael. We have discussed this prior, but I think he might have reworded this in a way that may be a little bit new. With a 2-year research agreement with the FDA over cold chain, does that mean we won't learn the results until then? And does that delay revenue generating ability from the cold chain technology MVMD has developed?
Yeah, so just to clarify, the collaborative research agreement is in motion. We've already reviewed it by our parties. It's in their court to finalize it. In fact, we've even updated our response with signature names versus a generic version. So that would be the immediate next step. And I don't control it. It'll be measured in days, certainly weeks at the most. The results will be immediately following that, where we have not had the normal regroup that you would expect, two science teams meeting, going through the results and aligning on the publication of that. So that step will be done with them. And then I can't comment further because there's immediate applications. And depending on the journey that we do, there's a lot of breadth that can be done under this concept with them, but it's not to indicate a limiting factor of its ability to engage in a commercial relationship or to bring a partner to have front row seats or a triangle in that agreement. All of that would still be on the table.
Yeah, and Dennis, if you don't mind me just elaborating something for someone who's not used to signing contracts, correct me if I'm wrong. When you've got a contract going back and forth, you send over without signatures on it because you're going back. Okay, what do you want to change? What do you have to do? When you personally sign it and pass it over, that means I am perfectly fine with everything that's in this. Now, if you sign this, it becomes an agreement. Am I correct by saying that?
Yeah. So I haven't signed it. We've updated the signature names to be no longer placeholders, to be clear. But yes, what you said, if they send it back, there might be changes or edits. They could just be going through their own approval process before they present it. But yeah, we're that far along and that confident with it.
Perfect. I just wanted to elaborate for anybody. And it seems like even for myself.
Yeah. My personal technique is not to send signed documents in advance. My desire is to usually have last signature and make sure, that the copy is the one that we've signed and all of that, but minor.
Absolutely. Well, we've got the next question here from Charlie. Charlie says or asks, in your opinion, Dennis, what do you believe will be the first forgive me. I believe we've already gone over cash generating pipeline that will come out of the current pipeline. Charlie wrote, and thank you very much for your question. I believe we've already answered that in a couple of times, but I want to make sure, again, just going down here and making sure we're asking everyone's questions that we can. So the next one is from Dr. Thomas Grupp. I'm an investor from Germany. Came over from the ivermectin discussion to MVMD. As a vet, I know the potential of ivermectin, especially in veterinary science. Can you patent a generic drug in a new formula like Ivectisol? And if yes, are you applying that patent worldwide?
I will answer that, yes. So first of all, yes, a new formulation is patentable and it has to go through review. We're in the middle of that, not in the middle of that. We know that this patent will be issued. And do we intend to push it out globally? Yes, we do. Do we know that this, as a patent, you only know if something is good once you've tried it? Have we tried it? Yes, we've tried it in companion animals. It's been injected into beagle dogs successfully, no adverse events. As I've said, it's been injected across a wide group of husbandry animals very effectively. So yes to both questions. One, can we patent it? Definitely. And two, will we intend to do it globally? Very much so. Ivermectin was $1 billion blockbuster drug as an animal husbandry drug alone when it first came out 3 decades ago. So we believe the potential of a better ivermectin, use less, more effectively, more humanely, and in a population of animal husbandry like poultry, which it has never been able to be adapted to properly. Yes, to all of that.
Now, Brandon, I probably should build. So Mike did sort of drop, like an area that I just want, I'm able to be even clear on. So the process back and forth with an examiner. So basically the patent was filed, and we filed for an acceleration of patent review. And you go back and forth over the last several months on objections from an examiner. It's a very standard process. Only a third of patent applications even make it to approval. So what Mike said, and I just want to be this clear, we've already seen the final verbal acceptance of the final objections that were raised. And so Mike alluded to our confidence in getting that. So when we have that in hand, there'll be a formal number, and congratulations. It will be material news, and we will absolutely press release that to the marketplace. But at this point, as you would have expected when we first filed it, we believe it's novel. We know it's something we'd want to protect globally. We pursue a journey. Nothing has changed in our confidence. And now we're 99% of the process through. The documents I've read personally in the last 48 hours are very exciting. And we are looking forward, unless there's other objections that get raised at this stage, in proceeding with a very strong global play now that protects that. And why is that important? Because we're applying it to a generic drug, to what Mike said, which now gives a 20-year new patent to a generic drug, which we think is pretty exciting, especially cancer, husbandry, COVID. There's some big applications.
Yeah, and talking about applications, talking about what you're currently doing to really, you guys know what you have, and you're very, very confident with it. I think investors who've been really looking at this company have a very good understanding of what we believe that you have as well. But there's many people out there who still don't. And this sort of somewhat comes across the same question we had prior. We'll talk about media coverage over these different things, where this one is coming from Anon. It appears that the market has not fully grasped the potential from the BSL study. What can shareholders expect in terms of expanded media coverage in the future, and how MVMD is working towards that? So working towards getting that message, getting those trial results out to investors.
Yeah, so I think that will be answered as we move to human trials. Why do we do that data? What's the objective of it? The objective isn't to create shareholder awareness, really, candidly. The objective is to move it along the spectrum of commercialization. When we build the business, the shareholder value and awareness happens naturally. So we take those results. They're already, I have to be careful here from, next week we have a presentation on that exact topic early in the week with someone, very senior, that's very motivated to help us on this next leg. And that's what these trial results, that's what data does to our ability to advance the business. The underlying tone of that question, which I'll answer again, is mainstream media. What's novel? Mainstream media pursues data and what's novel. So without a doubt, I have an interview this afternoon. Actually, I should triple check. I think I have till 2:30. I have an interview this afternoon with someone over in Europe that's very interested in this journey with a a very large following. You're going to see all sorts of that as the news comes, as ivermectin gets debated, and there's different things that are happening as people realize the variants that are happening with COVID-19. Vaccines, I hate to break it to the audience, but vaccines are here forever with COVID. COVID will likely never be eradicated. The data, we were reading abstracts again on that this morning. There will be a role for ivermectin or other therapeutics like ivermectin for the rest of our lifetime. And if it's not with this, it will be with the next pandemic. So don't think this is little news. So our journey is to continue to create and validate through results and through data, which immediately translates into investor awareness through mainstream media. We don't need to get ahead of ourselves.
Well, to switch the tempo just a little bit here to another aspect of the business is from Doreen. How soon might we have an insulin wafer? Treating type 1 diabetes without needles or the need for refrigeration insulin would be huge.
Right. Perfect. So with some of the work that we were doing, that we basically looked at our delivery system and how we could improve it and the way that we were preserving the insulin monomer within the matrix that we were producing for the sublingual. So we have on the drawing board another set of testing that we'll do. We're trying to line up the appropriate animal model to do this testing in, which for us would be probably rabbit we would prefer. So we're lining that up. We believe that we've solved most of the problems for mucosal absorption of the insulin with our technology now, and we're going to go and test it out. The other thing is that between COVID and all the other things that we've been doing, it basically, there was only so much work that we could do and really do properly. So advancing the preclinical cancer trials was a priority. Advancing the animal husbandry trials was a priority. So Ivectisol had to be made for these trials. We had to do some other work that we were doing in Selectisol for the upcoming TB trials. So all of this work basically was prioritized over and above the insulin work, but insulin is still on our radar. We're not giving up. We believe that sublingual administration of insulin will fit into the overall insulin, groundwork of how insulin is dosed. We believe a fast-acting sublingual has its place in the arsenal of insulins. So again, we will be working on it.
Appreciate that. And that actually answers, going back to Kyle, who's been patiently waiting at the top of this list, because I wanted to get back to the question that answers his third question. So you got two more there. We're going to keep seeing, though, because I didn't want to spend too many questions on one individual because there's so many people asking. The next question here has been asked before. This is Nick. I'll just say it really quickly. Hi, my question is for Dennis. When can you expect the cold chain results? What level of revenue are you expecting from this? And are there any deals on the table on bigger organizations like Pfizer? We did already ask that, and the answer is already there. This is being recorded. You will be able to find that when you go back and read again or watch again. This next one is from Michael. I think it's a little bit of a variation to a past question. We're going to go ahead here. In the media release and website, it shows that the company is getting results from the FDA polio lab from the ELISA results review. Does this mean it's an FDA approval, or is it just a testing done in the FDA polio lab?
So I'll answer that. The work that's being done at the FDA is a validation of our approach to cold chain preservation of the antigen. It's not testing that is being done by approval. As I laid out the strategy for you, what we do is we then go to our partner, we integrate the type of process that we're looking at into their manufacture of the vaccine. They then go to the regulatory body, and then they would get approval. The work that we're doing with the FDA is to validate our approach to cold chain preservation of polio, and then to take that and put it into a vaccine production line and then get that validated. This is not an approval process. This is validation of our approach to cold chain.
Absolutely, and appreciate it. And the next one here, I believe I can even answer this one. Do we need an FDA approval for the cold chain technology since all excipients were previously FDA approved? I believe that's what the 505(b)(2) is for, correct?
Yeah, different projects, but exactly, it will still require FDA approval, and how, whether that's a 505(b)(2) or not in the future. I mean, that'll be dependent on the partner and what their objectives are.
Absolutely. I'm going to just bear with me for 1 second to see if these questions have been asked. It goes on. Do we still have to do clinical trials to show the efficacy of the drug? We are speaking about the polio lab, the efficacy of the drug on mice/humans.
We could talk about
once you have an ELISA testing that's done during the production process, this would probably have to be done and it's probably not mice, in a primate model or even tested initially in a phase 1 trial in humans. So under 505(b), let's say in the States, or an equivalency in Europe or in India, you would still have to do something to show equivalency where you could reduce dose, you need the same dose, you need a slightly increased dose. This would still have to be validated in a bioequivalency study. So there would still have to be a small study done to validate the manufacturing process besides the ELISA testing process.
Okay, and just if you don't mind going with this question, because it seems like a step-by-step and they build on each other. If efficacy is non-issue/testing comes back positive, will the next step be showing a pharmaceutical company the results and allow them to do their own testing / concurrent with the FDA testing in human?
So at a point where we know that we've validated the process for cold chain using the ELISA, then it becomes a question of presenting that data to a pharmaceutical partner and then getting the pharmaceutical partner to walk hand in hand with us through the rest of the stages. We're basically, as Dennis said, we're teaching the partner how to fish. We're showing them our process. We're showing them how it integrates into their own current vaccine production. And then we would help them with whatever stages they would need if necessary, although most of these guys have tremendous personnel. So they would then take it from there and go through the processes to get final approval, and we would have a licensing agreement that would be based on milestones taking it to final approval. It's just that simple.
Yeah, Brandon, I could say this, it's not an ask question, but my personal belief of a perfect business model is gated performance. We don't have to try and make the perfect deal on the outcome. You make perfect gated steps that offset financial, and as results are delivered, it increases the benefit to both parties. That's the way I like to shape a deal like that.
No, very well said and understandable as well. And speaking of tests and results, the last question from this individual, lastly, will the company be publishing the data for the BSL-4 testings, since many of the ivermectin tests publish papers along with them, as well as to support the findings?
Yes, we intend to publish the same way that we intend to publish in the preclinical trials. We intend to publish the abstract or all the data from the BSL trial. So we will be doing it. They have to be collated. They have to be double checked. This takes time. We will be doing this probably within the next 30 or 40 days. Again, writing an abstract. If you're submitting an abstract, sometimes it goes back and forth, sometimes up to 90 days. I have abstracts that I've been involved in publication. It goes to the person who reviews it. They have corrections. They send it back to you. So this can take a little time. But yes, the intent is there to publish everything that we do in the long run, any preclinical type of trial.
Thank you for that. The next one is from Dave. Hello, thank you for all of your hard work and achievements. As a seasoned biotech investor, I find myself wanting to understand the technology better. Hopefully you have over the last hour and a half if you've been paying attention. I love that. Can you publish a white paper and or a deck describing the mechanism of action of your products without sacrificing IP? I feel like this would show up investor support and allow me to introduce the story to other biotech investors. The technology is a bit opaque at the moment. Investors want to know. Dave from Canmore.
So yeah, there's a couple things there. How we publish and who our target market is a bit of an assumption in that question. We have very few partners in the world that need to understand very clearly what we're doing. So, but we do recognize that the more accessible our story is, the easier it is to tell, et cetera. So we even have Mountain Valley University, which is just, Mike and I a week and a half ago shot a series of tech overview, market application, the deeper dive, if you will, on each of the products that we're going after, relative anchored to the four sort of core technologies. So I think that will provide a lot of ammunition on the process, the approach, what we believe the technology will do that's differentiated. And I think we'll answer that. The business of writing white papers and all of that, I think as results come out, publishing that data in a third-party published way is 100% top of our priorities. And you're going to start to see that, particularly around cancer and COVID, where you start to pronounce on life-changing applications that others can learn from. Very high on our radar.
Well, this question, thank you for that, Dave, and thank you for the answers. Goes really well with this next question. They could almost be together. We've spoken about this first part, but I'm going to say it regardless because the second part is the meaty part of the question. Hi, can Dennis speak onto any plans to drive marketing and PR alongside future updates? The YouTube interviews are great, but seem more geared to a Canadian echo chamber / converted retail investors. Are there plans to get the message out to a scientific journals, international media outlets, etc., to attract more retail, but also institutional investors? So very similar to what Dave's saying about the biotech investors, the ones who want to hear the more meat in the story. Do you have plans for that?
So interestingly enough, we just changed our distribution list for our media releases. So people will notice we left one company for another, and we did that very specifically for a stronger North American presence, and including targeting biotech, healthcare, the types of coverage that'll amp up for the next phase of growth for our company. So absolutely, we have 3 active publicists. I'm not going to say campaigns, but maybe retainers, the right word, that are pushing angles to our story to generate awareness. So I think the answer is yes. We recognize as we go to this next level. And I will qualify, as I alluded to in the last question, we have a very, very narrow audience that we're going after. We don't struggle with business development. Our credibility in the pharma landscape, they're our ultimate partners. We have a nutraceutical play that we almost get inundated in, and we have to just sort of rationalize what plays are we doing in that space relative to drugs and vaccines. And right now, I remind the team often, we don't need to be doing Super Bowl ads anytime soon because it's not what we do. We don't sell direct products to an end consumer. We help, the efficacy of our partners' molecules and their work. So don't get too sidetracked by awareness. I think that's a bit of a narrow scoreboard. Focus on what we're doing. The data generates awareness. I think we're doing it at the right pace, with the right focus on reserving cash, spending it wisely.
And once again, thank you for your answer. The next question is from Daniel. This is something we haven't spoken about actually, or not specifically. You have mentioned you are focused on disadvantaged countries where the need for your technology is huge. What African countries are you in conversation with? And I'll add, if any.
Yeah, so to the bigger spirit of like the DNA of the company and what we're doing, it's very interesting how many times I've been in, business development discussions and quickly weeding partners in or out if we're not shared on the vision of what we're trying to do. So, we don't say this lightly. There's a phrase that I've signed off on in a few of our shareholder updates about, more mothers, more fathers, brothers, sisters. cousins, friends, it's like, well, what does that mean? What does it mean to have more life and less challenges of, the scourge of disease? So we have all of that here in North America, but we are so grossly uneducated on the real realities of healthcare globally. And I alluded to earlier the billions of dollars that are directly related to the GDP of the most disadvantaged countries, related just to the failure of healthcare, disease, and very accessible vaccines that just don't make it there. We think it's a really noble thing to do, where when you're not started on, how much profit can we make on this particular molecule, it opens up those conversations with people. And as I said, it's fascinating. You can almost see it in the eyes of a business development conversation, in like there's this alignment, a bit of a breath, if you will, of someone, yeah, we want that together. So I'll link that as an aspiration for our company. And frankly, even Mike's personal story with polio with his dad, it's like, those are very real things. They're great in a marketing brochure, but they're better when they define what you do. And so what I love about this, and I'll answer this question about the continent of Africa very specifically. The deal that we're working towards is starting in the West African countries. And in particular, maybe I'm just going to not go too deep because I don't want this to become a material discussion. But in particular, with the focus on the immediate support of human trials in the marketplace, because remember, ivermectin's already broadly adopted and used there for all sorts of parasitic control for both human and husbandry. So where you've got a really low threshold of political interference, we can move quickly. But the ability to impact the husbandry animals, just the farming and agricultural side of that business is huge. And then the human toll of future variants and stopping COVID is, again, right in our wheelhouse, where vaccines are going to have a very hard time getting distributed in any scale at cost and outside of cold chain and all of those things. So there's a very natural fit for our company that just makes a lot of sense, and it just feels good. Frankly, we know we can make a difference, and it answers commercialization questions for our investors. It answers questions of why we get out of bed and the legacy and things of looking back at our work and saying, "Holy, we were part of something. Wow, this was cool. Without us, these things would have happened. With us, trying a bit harder, doing things that aren't driven by profit alone, I think we can do more." So hopefully that answers. I know that was a complicated question with its specificity on third world, but I hope it gives you better context of that.
No, I believe it did, and you obviously call yourself too, because you can't say those specific countries and names. If anyone's wondering, that's material news. It needs to be press released when it's that large, but it definitely says that there's talks being had, and you're very confident with them at this time. The next question is from Sean. Sean from Vancouver. Dennis, is it true that you take no salary? If so, is it also true that your stock options are for over $2? If this is correct, this should show your belief in the company and its future. I like this part. And it should set some nervous Nellies at ease. Asking it as it's written.
Yeah, so this might have been a question from my mom or something. Yeah, I love. The truth be known, until there was a point where I had drawn no salary. When we went public, I started drawing a salary, as you would expect. But my belief in building the company was for options alone. So getting compensated in stock, in shares, and stock options was important for me, because it didn't whet an agenda at the table of not focusing on results. So I think I got a lot of credibility from the team early on. When you come in and you're sort of new, and we haven't talked about cannabis, but I think that's an appropriate topic. I'll leave it to you how you want to ask it. But, when I first came in, there was a lot of direction that we were headed, and I didn't want people to think that I wasn't wedded to the stakes at play. To the $2 option, correct, the last round of options that were granted to me, I have no ability to set my compensation. Just to be clear, there's a compensation committee. I report directly to the board. So they assess what's fair in the marketplace. I feel very well compensated in the role. I prefer options versus money because I believe in what we're building and what we're doing. But you're right, in the last round of options, they're anchored at a $2 plus price point. So pretty excited about building above that point, or they're worth absolutely nothing.
Yeah, and talking about building past that point and just building in general, this is a journey. There's going to be short-term catalysts. There's going to be medium-term catalysts. There's going to be long-term catalysts. Spiros, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, from London asks, hi, Dennis and Mike. I'm a big fan of the work you've been doing and a proud investor. I consider myself a long-term investor in MVMD. My question is regarding your long-term vision, like I was just saying. Where do you see this company in 2 to 5 years from now?
Oh, that's a good one. Go for it.
Some of the things that we're working on have a shorter play-out time, such as animal husbandry in places like Bangladesh, in places like Africa. Some of them will come to fruition quite quickly. Some, like the FDA 505(b)(2), will come to fruition within the next 2 years in terms of an approval. After we do the pharmacokinetic study as an approval to the equivalency of stromectol. But I think the biggest question, the biggest plays are how quickly can we take the preclinical trials that we're doing in cancer, and how quickly can we move this forward into partnerships and into seeing people having an alternative that do not have a real alternative for treatment today with cancer. So we're hoping that we can move these forward at a tremendous pace. There are accelerated pathways available to radically new or better therapies that, when presented to, let's say, the EMA, the FDA, or other governments, they would be adopted on an accelerated pathway. We're hoping that ivermectin intratumorally presents this type of groundbreaking paradigm in cancer for people who can't be treated now adequately with checkpoint inhibitors. The preclinicals will give us some indication, but it's really the phase 1. I think an interim readout in phase 1, maybe 6 months away, and we'll know where we're going in cancer. So I hope that answers the question. These are the type of timelines that we're looking at for basically the main lines of research that we're doing now and the main product lines that we're envisioning.
So, Brandon, I might answer that. So Mike sort of answered, what is the vision of the company from projects and timing, which I think was very well said. If I were to think about, so I have shareholders that write letters that I find very encouraging. Like they're almost encouraging us to finish our work. And why I find that, inspiring is there's no doubt one of the inevitable crossroads that we're going to face as a company. We're doing massive transformational work that we have said will impact, if we do our work properly, will impact every human, husbandry, and companion animal on Earth. It's kind of like, wow, like you get your head around it. So I've gone through soul searching. You have this short window in life. You have front row seats very few times to do something transformational. Mike and I met for a reason, the team that we built for a reason. So my vision has evolved. How I would have answered that question a year ago versus today is quite different. The vision, without a doubt, is to finish the transformational work. And then one of the inevitable crossroads that I alluded to is, we're entering the multi-billion-dollar playground. Pharma is a $1.4 trillion space. That we without a doubt acknowledge the value of the technology, the applications, and the scale and size. And so an inevitable crossroad for our shareholders, whether it's hostile or whether it's in a handshake partnership way, will be to make a decision to sell the company to a pharmaceutical, a fellow biotech company, a foundation that wants to make a difference. So My gut and my heart has transformed from when I first met this business to just help it grow. And, I'm a business guy first, and you kind of, you do the right things. I've never felt more inspired in my career than now to think about my legacy, with my kids watching, my wife watching, my relatives, family, to say like, wow, we were part of something that we can look back and say it made a difference. And so, we have this practical side that Mike alluded to. We have this inevitable collision of business value that we know this company will be massively attractive. And perhaps if I were to better say, the housing market's on, being exploded right now, and people are, pitching, our kids will live here and we'll never change anything. You hear about these creative ways. My wish will be that the right partner, if we get to that point, will fulfill the legacy that Mike has created with the science and the true change, and what I feel is my personal responsibility to optimize shareholder value, but in a way that leaves a legacy that we've never imagined. So anyways, a bit of a different answer. And 2 years out, I hope I stay true to that as what drives us each day.
Yeah, I appreciate that from both of you. I mean, we do have a couple of minutes here, so I'm going to sneak in a couple of questions there, but that was the perfect closing remarks of why you're doing this. I should have known that and twisted that to the last couple of ones, but I wasn't expecting those very long answers there, so I appreciate it. But we will ask probably about two more, and then we do need to cut it off. I know there's a lot more, but we've been at this for 2 full hours going through, and you got an interview coming up as well. So we're going to ask this question from Mark. How come a large pharma company hasn't already found the fix for cold chain if you as a small company can? Potentially.
Do you have a tight answer for that?
So I'll give you an example. Some of like the Pasteur, they've had scientists working on cold chain, looking at different approaches. There are companies like Vaxis that have looked at solving the problem. They've looked at lyophilization. They've looked at spray drying. Large number of scientists looked at it. Does that mean that it doesn't take a slightly new vision to solve the problem eventually? Some of them have come close. They've come to 70, 80% with some of the serotypes in terms of preservation. We just think that our application of Quixome to this problem in terms of layering inside the vial brought a new paradigm to how we could solve cold chain, polio vaccine, specifically preservation outside the cold chain. So it's just a question of anything. You can bring a new approach and a new standpoint or viewpoint to what other people believe is like an insolvable problem. I've never thought that any problem is insolvable. It's just a question of, can you bring enough experience and can you bring enough creativity to really solve the problem? It's just like anything. Do I think that anything is impossible? No. Do I think that I can solve everything? No. But I think I'm smart enough to understand what I can solve and to get the help I need to solve the things that I alone can't solve. So I think that's the way that you form a team that's successful, is you understand your strengths, and more you understand your weaknesses, and then you fill the team with people that complement your strengths and fill out all of the weaknesses that you have. So we've been able to successfully do that. And that's why I think we've advanced cold chain already to the point where we're quite close to finishing off that project.
Brandon, there's a paradigm in the way that question's asked, as if all the smart people live inside pharmaceutical companies. And so that that is a pause for laughter. Truly, there's tens of thousands of biotech companies. There's another 100,000, science-based companies outside of that. It's people get so far and then they stop and they get on to other things, and they're usually driven by profits and moving on to the next thing, fail fast, move on. We just happen to be picking up some of that stuff, that slack.
Yeah, well said by both of you. I appreciate it. Well, we're going to be asking the last question for today. Then we still have a lot of people in attendance. What I'd love at the end of this, you'll get a very, very quick survey. It's like 3 different questions. I would love for you to fill it out, so we can get your opinions on what we went through today. But speaking on transparency, which is the main driver of why we did this. Ask me anything, quite literally. We're going to be speaking about a question on transparency. Osman asks, as the last question for today, if any of these trials fail, will MVMD report of their failure in the name of transparency?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So people should just be reminded we're a publicly traded company. All our financials are audited and presented each quarter. We absolutely are required by law to present material information to our shareholders, to the marketplace. We would never operate anything different, and failure is okay. We're in a business, so hiding that would be even more asinine in a biotech company versus what did we learn. I just tell the team every day, fail fast, let's keep moving. We have too much good stuff going on. So without a doubt, we will operate within the framework of the law. We will always disclose material news.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate for everybody, well over 200 people still in attendance throughout this entire 2 hours. I appreciate all of you staying here. Dennis, Mike, I appreciate very much for your time giving for investors, taking these questions one after the other, quite literally just went down a list and just kept going. So I appreciate that. We had slotted for an hour. We went 2 hours. Dennis, if you don't mind having the closing words, what would you like to say to your investors who've taken this time today to hear from both of you and ask these questions?
Okay, so my first point might be to you to say, hey, thank you for running through this. If there are a bunch of questions there, please, if you can cut and paste it or whatever, I'd be happy to do another run through with Sarah just on my cell phone. And I don't want anyone to feel there was a question that wasn't answered today. And that might be the best way to wrap up. We value our shareholders. I know it takes, in the midst of some of the rumors and all the nonsense that's spread for personal gain for people that are in that other short position, stay true to what we're doing. We wanted to give you the full transparency today. There's no questions that were off limits because we wanted our shareholders to know firsthand that, first of all, you've got a commitment and a dedication from the leadership team, and that we're not alone. We have an incredible group of people all working together, all learning from each other, and change makers. I talk about it often, but change makers keep coming out and getting, change makers attract change makers, I guess is what I'm saying. So you haven't seen anything yet. I feel like we're just getting started and we're getting into a really cool, exciting part. So my final thing is just thank you. Thank you for believing. Many shareholders send in amazing notes of encouragement. They mean a lot to the group. And look at the scoreboard on the difference we make. Don't get caught on a scoreboard that you're being coached to someone else's advantage. That's it.
Perfect. Well, once again, thank you, everybody. I'm going to end this here. Then it gives us a 10-second timer as it's ending. You'll be going over to Mountain Valley's website just after this, but there should also be a survey. We'd just love for you to be able to fill that out as well. So thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. And we've got 8 more seconds here of seeing all of our faces as we go on with the rest of our day.
Thanks, everybody.
So take care, everyone.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Keep well.